Hey guys, Modern Craftsman podcast. It is just Nick and myself today. It's actually Wednesday morning. Typically we're recording on Tuesday nights. We had some scheduling mishaps that we're looking to work through.
My fault.
Yeah, Nick's been he's been dropping the ball lately.
Pain
I think
in
we'll
the
keep
ass.
him on for right now though. So we get into some listener questions. And then something that my wife sent me via Instagram, which was kind of a comical meme, but also I do think has some truth to it. And I hope you guys like it. We get into some good stuff as far as the listener question and kind of just basics of running your company. Nick has some book suggestion for you. I know you guys a lot of times ask for what books we're reading, which is kind of based around ensuring that you're creating that scarcity and finding a customer that's a good fit for you. So hopefully you guys like it. I know you have these podcasts have resonated with you, and it's just Nick and myself. And next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program with Adam McKee. So that's our intro for today. Nick decided to not do it. We don't have a guest to do it. So hope you guys like this one. I'm going to see something nasty.
Yep.
So, on, was it Saturday or Sunday? Saturday, I went for a ride. There's like a big group of guys. And, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this one kid who's like super fast, like basically a pro we were riding with. And I was behind him. And, we had just started a trail and he took a weird line and I followed him. And it just like... I went to go around a probably 3-foot stump, and then like the tree had somehow broken at the top and was like, so it was like a stump up and then leaning down to the ground, and he took a weird line around it, and I followed him, and I just like, I don't know what happened. I caught my foot peg or something, and it like tossed my leg into the stump, and I wear like full braces that protect from twisting and impact, and it felt like a dead leg, and I was like, I just hopped right back up. The guy behind me was like, that was pretty bad. Are you okay? I was like, I feel like it looked worse than it was. And then we rode a few miles. I stopped, and it was just sore. It just felt like I got kicked in the leg. And then came home, like unloaded, a few hours. It was sore, nothing crazy. My neighbor asked me to run over to his place and help him move some stone with my tractor, and it like cooled off and gotten cold. So I was probably on my tractor for 45 minutes. And I went to get off, and I was like, yo, I can't move my my whole quad. Like, so sore and stiff. And I came inside, and I pulled my jeans down, and my thigh was like, I'll send you pictures of it, but probably 1.5 times the size of my other one. And, like, rock hard. And Rachel's like, do we have to go to the emergency room? I was like, nah, I feel like it's fine. I think it's just, like, a contusion. And maybe it was worse than I realized, but like it was my whole quad, like the whole thing. And it kind of felt like a muscle, like a tear and also a dead leg at the same time. Went to sleep. It was pretty stiff, but it's been getting progressively better, but it swelled a lot. And then I started getting like the swelling was hard, but then I started getting this weird fluid where like the swelling was very soft, and I guess it was blood like inside of me because nothing bruised. And yesterday I put on an ACE bandage because they're like, try compression on it. So I put on an ACE bandage around my leg, and I wrapped it pretty tight, and I wore it all day at work and like wasn't paying attention. I guess you're not supposed to have them on for that long. And I didn't take it off until I went to take a shower last night. And I was like, oh, it bruised. So I guess what I must have done, and this is just based on like my mind saying this is what must have happened. There's no medical research, but I guess it was blood in there, like within the muscle or underneath the muscle, and the ACE bandage compressed it. And as I moved around all day, it squeezed the blood from like where it was up above my ACE bandage all to one spot. And I took my pants off last night and went to take the ACE bandage off. I was like, oh, it bruised. I'll have to send you the video because it like the front of my thigh looked like there was like just a sack in there. But check out this bruise. It's pretty legit.
Since you guys are listening, he's currently pulling his jeans down. Oh my God.
Right?
It looks like, I mean, it just looks like another tattoo.
I mean, it's like bright
You should
purple.
get that tattoo.
But like, I don't know what I did, because I didn't hit myself up there, but I guess like all the blood that was within my leg from the impact and from the swelling, I must have just like pushed up there, and it pulled up there and kind of sat there long enough that it bruised. And this is all just in my head making this up.
Sure.
But I was taking videos of it last night, because it looked like it was my butt on the front of my leg. Like, that's how swollen it was.
Dude, that's brutal.
So it's been a little bit tough to walk.
Okay. So can you walk now? You can obviously walk now.
Just like, it's getting better every day. It felt like I got like kicked with a heel in the leg, like a massive dead leg. Yeah. But it also kind of felt like a muscle tear. So even now, it's still pretty painful, and I'm having trouble. I'm not walking normal. But I mean, I went to work every day, and like every day it gets a little bit better. But yeah, I'm definitely walking with a limp. Bad.
That's like, I mean, that's the side of it, right? Like, we talk about all the good about having a hobby, and obviously yours being riding, but it's like, man, that could have been pretty bad.
I know. Like, one of our friends broke his femur a couple months ago. Basically, like the same type of thing. Just like got tossed into a tree.
So that's actually an interesting segue into. I had a conversation yesterday with I have a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
And they were talking about disability insurance for me. And he was like, just in case you get hurt, like, obviously you want to continue to have income in case you can't work. And it got me thinking. I was like, I can't answer that question right now if it makes sense, because I want to understand, like, would I actually not be able to work?
Yeah.
Where it's like, a lot of what I do, I'm not as hands-on as you are now. And it's like, should I be paying into a disability policy if I'm not physically working? Where it's, I guess if I was,
like, you'd be able to work from home, or
yeah, I mean, I could shift a lot of my work to like being on a computer, right? There, I wouldn't have the same touch, but there's still a lot I could do behind a computer. I could also sit in front of a microphone more often, right?
Yep.
But then I was like, well, what if I was really hurt, like in a hospital, not being able to, like, not being awake, like brain dead or whatever, like that. There's so many stages of that, and it, like, so I'm torn.
It's all
as
fun
to, like,
stuff to think about.
Oh, it's wonderful. I also had a very similar conversation with I guess he's technically my father-in-law, stepfather-in-law, whatever. And he paused me at one point. He's like, you seem to have a lot of anxiety. I'm like, no, this doesn't actually bother me. It's just stuff I think about.
Yeah.
And I told him that story that I've told in the podcast before about kids and how, like, when they ask you to read another book, it's like, like thinking about that documentary my wife wrote, and I watched, and he was like, you really, like, you think about that every single night? I'm like, every night, man. Every time they ask me to read a book, I think about it. He goes, do you think that you're, like, starting to hurt yourself, like, like your brain, because you think of this so often? I'm like, no, it doesn't bother me. He goes, are you sure? I'm like, no.
I just keep telling myself it doesn't
pretty
bother
confident.
me, and it won't.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I don't, like, this isn't hurting my mental health. But the like, for you, like, I guess my question, do you have disability insurance?
Well, I feel like I was going to ask you first. I guess it comes down to...
I didn't get it.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it comes down to, like, in my mind, that catastrophic type of event, I think at some point, right, you could put everything in place in order to protect yourself, and something else could happen. So it's like, at what point do you draw the line? Right. If you could make do... So for me, I don't... And I had the same conversation where it's like, should I have workers' comp on myself? Is it worth the cost? And what I kind of came to realize is, like, again, you could put everything in place and then something else happens. You can plan and account for everything. And at some point in life, you just have to not even, I don't have any other word than have faith that you'll be able to work that out. But like, there's always this crazy potential for something to happen, the anxiety of that happening. And I think to live your life that way, I think you have to be smart. For me, the mental health side of this is better than the physical potential for detriment. And so what happens with my mind is, if something were to happen to me, I would like to think that I built up a large enough network and have enough people around me that if I needed to go do something else, or make a living elsewhere, whether it were short term or long term, that I have enough contacts in the industry that I could make that happen, and it wouldn't, it wouldn't be like the end of us.
I think a lot of people should consider, whether they do it or not, but like just consider that scenario where it's like, I didn't have life insurance forever. And then finally, obviously starting having kids, and then I sat down and I'm like, man, like, worst case scenario and I die, it's like, I want my family to be protected. Like the house being able to be paid for, and that was a weird conversation.
Very.
Because we went through this list of things that, what I bring to the table and provide financially. And it's just, you need this. Oh, you need that. It's, and it was just, by the end of it, it's like a couple $1 million. And I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah.
And then you do and then it's like the same thing with my wife. I'm like, all right, well, if you don't have a wife in your life, like she's no longer around, what do you need? I'm like, we're rattling a lot. I'm like, I don't know. It's, I'm not doing a good job explaining it, but it was just a weird conversation to have. And,
it's one of those things that you don't like. It's like writing your will. Like you don't
which is what we talked about the other day. Like we have to do that.
Yeah. So like it's one of those things that like you don't want to do, because now you're kind of facing mortality, and it's actually way easier than you think it's going to be. But it's just one of those weird things where it's like, all right, I'm writing something for when I die, or picking up life insurance, which like I think is an absolute must. You have children, you have a family, that's something you should be paying into all the time. But as far as I think that like the will, all that stuff, super important. And if you can get away with it, you don't have kids, you're not married, but I think once you bring other people into the mix, it's imperative. You have
you want
to
them
do
to
that.
Be protected. And I've known people that have done very well in life and have passed away and not had life insurance. And it's a mess. It's, they have to sell the house, they have to do that, like, because they don't have anything to protect that.
Yeah, and then like, so it's a mess on many levels, because a lot of times that doesn't even go to the family, like the state comes in, and that gets involved, and then you have kids or next of kin who are now trying to figure out finances and debts and assets when they should be grieving somebody. So it's selfish not to, and I do think that the insurance, that's probably something that like, that would be good. But then I think at the end of the day, we're like, I've had many injuries and I typically can work through them. And like, if something were to happen, even if I had insurance and I was off the job for a few weeks, a month, 6 months, like I would have to completely restructure my life regardless. That like money is one thing, but then like who's going to do the work? How am I going to manage the work? So there's so many things that you would have to account for that it's almost like, I think I would probably cross that bridge when I come to it.
Right.
I don't know if like putting everything in place to make that this is just my personal opinion. This may be, it's not right or wrong. Everyone has to make that decision for themselves. But I think that what I do and the way that I'm structured is risky in that way. And I've kind of accepted that, that all of my eggs are in one basket. And I think that if something were to happen, I have enough people in my network where it'd be like, hey, I have 6 months where I can't be doing this. What can I do for you to at least make some money? And if it's a long-term shift, it's a long-term shift. But I would like to think that I have a large enough network that I could reach out to people for help and kind of make a switch.
That's the, I guess that's to go along with something I said last week where, there's opportunity to make money outside of what you do on an hourly basis, right? And it's, if you and I were to choose a different path with the podcast, we could be doing this every single day, posting a podcast every single day. And that, there would be an enormous financial value to us to do that. We don't, because we simply don't have, I've been terrible with my schedule. I'm going to just admit that on air. I've texted Tyler far too many times last minute, like, hey, dude.
It's just been crazy with it's summer ending, getting the schools back in, both of us vacationing at the end of the year. It's like, it's insane right now.
I finally, I was like, I gave it to Catherine, works for us at NS for helping with content. I'm like, hey, I need you to run schedule on podcast because I keep screwing this up, and it's my fault. I'm giving people, hey, pick these days, and I'm not blocking off the days I'm not available. But point being is like, there, that's where, just to further like support where it's, hey, yeah, you have your day job, but open up additional opportunities for yourself, and that could, that could be your quote unquote life insurance policy, where it's, or not life insurance, your disability policy, where it's okay, well, if I do really get hurt, what is my other option?
Yeah. And I think, I also, I don't know, like, to account for kind of the force majeure type of events in business and in life, I think it's good to have some sort of backup plan in place, but to put so much of your energy towards what may potentially happen for me, it's tough because it's like, I don't know, what if I just like, I think that I'd sometimes, if the opportunity or like potentially bad situation presented itself, that like I would get into figuring out how to climb out of this. And that like sometimes all of my spare time and mental anxiety and kind of bandwidth isn't put towards, well, what if?
It's like renting a car, right?
Yeah.
You want the insurance or do you not? It's like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's gonna happen? But I think what you have to do is you have to look at what you have to make this decision financially as well. Like, what's it going to cost you per month? What are the chances?
That's the thing is, I've heard it's relatively inexpensive. So it's something I actually he's going to share with me in an email because he also asked about my team. I'm like, oh, he's like, yeah, we can help you set this up for your whole company. I'm like, and these are like as we grow, these are the things I want to be able to offer because there's probably a good majority of my team that has never even thought of disability insurance, and it's like, hey, for $10 a month, we can protect you. God forbid you ever got hurt. Oh yeah, that makes sense, and some might take advantage of it, and some may not. This podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. So, dude, I was on their Instagram again because I always pop on there, especially before we do a podcast. And I was looking at their tag photos. I still think one of the coolest parts of this, and actually Haynes Construction posted a barn that they did. I still think one of the coolest parts is the fact that you can paint this stuff black.
Yeah.
Like it's super cool. When I think black homes are cool in general. But to be able to do with a product like, the stuff that Duration has, the fly ash material, it's just super cool how, I don't know. My point is like, I like black homes, and the fact that you can do with a synthetic product is dope.
Well,
right?
the problem is that like the whole shift everything shifted towards darker homes, whether it's black, navy, windows, siding, and there's a lot of considerations to doing so that people are not taking. They're just, let's repaint our house black. It wasn't ever black before. And all of a sudden now your house is 40 degrees hotter than it ever was. And now all of your 100-year-old clapboard is like warping and drying out. PVC to paint black is almost impossible. There's special products to do so, but it's very labor intensive, might not hold up long term. And these guys are kind of giving you an option to do that that's going to be sustainable and create a long-lasting, durable product that's not going to just get absolutely trashed from the environments and from the sun. So as things have continued to move that way, they're giving you, like Nick said, a synthetic option that's going to be able to withstand and create a product for your customers that they're going to be getting some value out of. So
yeah, so whether you need moldings, siding, or custom exterior millwork, they have everything you need at durationmillwork.com. But check them out on Instagram as well. Check out those tag photos I was talking about that Haynes posted. Cool to see that product in a real life project. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool. So we've talked about Fire Safety Month, and the threat that wildfire poses is top of mind when it comes to that. And I wanted to give a shout out to Construction Instruction. Mark Lariberte has this school. It's an industry-leading building science training resource. But they actually posted a demo that they were doing with the clear visual of fire resistance of Rockwool. If you've been to any of the trade shows, you've probably seen it. They typically have a torch, which is right on the material, burning. And while it has a little char spot, it does not burn further than that.
Did I just get something in the mail showing that, or my email?
I don't know.
There was some, I just got.
I'm like describing something and Tyler's like mind is being blown.
It's
right
like
now.
when you have a dream that you didn't realize you had a dream, and then somebody says something and you're like, I had a dream last night. That's basically where, like, maybe this was a dream, but I feel like I got something in the mail recently. There was some dude with like long blonde hair, a picture of him burning Rockwool, and I was going to send it to you, be like, we got to get this dude on the podcast.
We absolutely should.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys want to learn more about Rockwool and its fire resistance, head over to Rockwool NA on Instagram or rockwool.com, and make sure you check out their R Class program. Join that. You get a bunch of awesome information, but access to their entire tech team. So if you have a project coming up, they can help you walk through the details.
I don't think that there's a blanket answer to this, but I do think that it's very important. It's something to consider. Yeah. And I think it's something to consider like I think of what I do and what you do, and while my business type and my business structure, who else is going to show up, who else is going to do the work, that's very risky. At the same time, like, I don't have as many mouths to feed as you. So, at the end of the day, like, everyone has their risk. You have to look at it as far as your responsibility to those people who are alongside you in business and life, and what's that worth, and how that's going to impact you financially kind of day to day. Like, does it outweigh it? But again, I kind of look at it where it's like, if something were to happen, that's an opportunity to kind of switch directions and try something else. And if that doesn't work, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I think that I would also be able to get out of kind of the situation that I were in when that were to happen. I also, like, while you are exposing yourself to more risk, I don't know if that's the way to live your life, to be like, well, I'm not going to do it because I may get hurt, because I may go to get my mail out of the mailbox and get smacked by a car.
Dude, so I'm in New York.
Yeah.
And for my Builder 20 group, so obviously 20 builders get together twice a year. And there's one group here that they're partners and they're brothers. And last night, everyone got here grabbing dinner, and one of the brothers shows up to dinner, and they're like, hey, where's your brother? Did you guys fly together? He's like, nope, we never fly together.
Yeah.
And at first, you're like, what? And he goes, security reasons. Like if something, and I was like, oh my God, like I've never thought of that. And
Yeah.
it's like, I remember growing up, and one of my father had a motorcycle, and one of his buddies, anytime they would go out together, they would swap wives on the bikes.
That's crazy.
And it's like, to think about, like, God forbid the bike goes down, like at least one parent survives.
Yeah, so go ahead.
We're getting super dark with this.
No,
This is but I've never, it's just weird to think that, I don't know.
Yeah, so
I was talking to Brad about it, and he's like, yeah, me and Ashley travel all the time.
Yeah.
And, he's like, and I've thought about it. I'm like, I've never thought about it. I've never thought like, oh, we should travel separately. First off, my wife would be like, yeah, let me guess, I'll go with the kids and you go on a different plane.
Well, the only time that, I mean, obviously I have anxiety, and like it's lessened as I travel. Travel used to be really tough for me just because it's like all things combined. You're going to somewhere you don't know. You're going to be exposed to people you don't know. There's like tight time constraints. You have documentation that you need. Don't want to forget shit. So like going away and travel I used to hate it. And like I kind of enjoy it now a lot of times because I'm traveling alone, and it's like the only time I get without anyone. But one of the first times Rachel and I went to fly somewhere without the kids, I was very anxious about that. I'm like, both of us are like on a plane, and if something happens, like it's not just one of us. And she's like, oh, like just don't even think about that kind of crap. But again, it's like to let that kind of, if that were to happen, and again, I'm not like the most spiritual or definitely not religious person, but like to plan your entire life around stuff like that, I think is tough and rather morbid. But yeah, when I went to college out in Boulder, there were that set of twins, and their parents were very, very well off, like 1% type of people. And they were from Connecticut, and they were not allowed to drive in the same car together. So we would go like from school and drive. They had a place in Aspen, and they were not allowed to drive together.
The twins,
yeah. Like they had to drive 2 separate cars back and forth, if something were to happen. And it like, when you hear that at 18, 19, it's like, that's crazy. That's silly. It's just a waste of gas money. And then like you think about it now. Think of the
environment.
I think about it now, and like what the reasons for doing so, and I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But it definitely is something to consider. But I just don't think that that's the way to go through life. I think that if it's something simple, right? Yeah, like riding on a motorcycle, I think that's simple enough where it's like, yeah, switch it up. But
right.
To like plan your entire life around, we can only do this, and to stress about that for it never to happen, I think is tough.
Right.
But yeah, thinking about that stuff is definitely not.
Yeah,
it's not enjoyable.
We're filling people with anxiety right now.
Yeah, but
let's good.
That's the same thing with, like you said, with will and life insurance and all that stuff. Like you have to do that. Like especially once you have kids, you owe that to them, to kind of get past your fears and your hesitation to do that.
So I'm gonna switch it up.
Let's switch it up.
Let's switch it up. So we got a question in our email. I have not read this, so
I was trying to find that earlier, and I guess I'm on my like normal email, hence
so this
me not being able to find it.
From Jake Ranke. Again, have not read this, so bear with me. Curious to hear a discussion.
What are your thoughts on life insurance?
Imagine. I've been thinking. So he opens it up. Low income craftsmanship. He says, I've been thinking a lot about the wide spectrum of income levels and how it relates to the wide spectrum of craftsmanship. If high income clients receive high quality craftsmanship and vice versa, does that mean that there's going to always be the need for poor craftsmanship? How do we work towards fixing that issue, and is there a fix? I feel like in an ideal world there would be no poor craftsmanship, but then that lowers the value of the trade, right? My mindset comes from that, I work part-time for a ministry that does construction projects and full-time for a custom remodeling company. We have kids and volunteers do the work. We typically work with low-income individuals or nonprofits. We provide labor and material for free, and we try and deliver a great product, but there are only so much you can do with volunteers. I think that. Go ahead.
It's a tough question. I think that the wording.
I think it has to do with scale.
Yeah, and I think the wording and the phrasing of it is incorrect because I don't think that there's necessarily room for poor craftsmanship. Like, I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. But I think that there's levels of quality, there's levels of finish, and there's needs for different levels kind of execution. And I don't think that's a problem. Like,
no, and I would go as far to say that, the majority of people, that buy homes, that live in homes, like the quality of how the baseboard was installed or the millwork, like that isn't something they even value.
Yeah, exactly.
Like at all. And it's funny, one of Meg's friends years ago bought a brand new spec, like track home, right? And they had us over and we're walking around and she's like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "It's fine." She goes, "Yeah, but look at the crown molding. It's like cracking away from the ceiling a little bit." She's like, I feel like I should go back to the builder." I'm like, "No." She's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, you posted something the other day and how, like, I'm building something different.
Yeah, exactly. And you're paying for something different.
And you're paying for something different. And it's, this is where when people say, "Oh, you're building a house, like a house should cost this much," but there's different levels to that, and there's and the expectations change. So poor craftsmanship, no, I'm not saying that they need to go in there and, slam the crown up and not think about it and not, do a decent job, but it's the circumstances at hand, right? Where it's, you don't have to overdo it for a particular product. It's like, yeah, like there's ways to paint at a lesser quality. I'm in a hotel right in front of me. It's like, yeah, these walls have dings and dents and orange peel, but this hotel's still enormously expensive.
Yeah.
And it's like, but and the miters on this, like, they're not perfect. It looks like they're maybe glued, maybe not, but it's not like, that's not the value. Like, there's no value there for it.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would agree the relationship to like volunteers and stuff. Well, that's, you're donating time and you're doing it for a good cause. And, a volunteer, depending on what they do, they might not have any skill, or they might have some, or they might have skill, but you're going into that knowing that the expectations are, let's get it in place and make a decent home.
Yeah, I think the problem is not all of these different kind of levels of construction. There's a need for everything. There's people who need options, right? It's the same thing as cars and restaurants. Like, you need inexpensive cars, and some people need, and I use that term lightly, like more expensive. Everyone has a need and values something differently. I don't think that you should only make high-end cars. I don't think that you should only make, low-end cars. But I think that there's certain families that have a need for each of them and value things differently. I think having those options is a good thing. I believe that the problem is if you sell or sign up and purchase something based on an expectation, if those expectations aren't met, say you sold a high-end house, and somebody brought in volunteer labor because they wanted to maximize their profit, or, more of a budget-friendly contractor and just put more money in their pocket, like, that's the problem there.
Right.
I don't think that, the lower end of construction, I don't think that's a problem at all.
No, and that's a conversation we've had before where, what I see a lot is, builders and remodelers, they go in, oh, we got, a premium dollar for this project. Let's, we're getting paid a lot. We're a high end builder, and we signed the contract and we're making 50% margin, blah blah blah. And then they turn around and they're like, all right, let's see who the cheapest painter is.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you? Oh, you were doing that to fatten your bottom line.
Exactly.
And there's so many issues with that where it's like, the whole point of being able to sell a project at a higher value is, yes, to increase your profit, but also to have the resources to do the job at a higher level, a higher caliber. And when you turn around and you fight, you basically find out who can do it the cheapest, based on the fact that they're making that trade's making less money. There's guys that are going to be able to bang it out at a lesser cost because they're more efficient, sure. But I'm talking specifically about working with someone that the trade makes less money. It's a short-term win. You're putting more money in your pocket, and that relationship with that trade is going to be damaged.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're ripping people off, and that's for me
on
where
both
the problem.
ends, too.
Yeah, that's where the problem lies.
The homeowner gets a shitty product, or shittier product than they expected and paid for, and the contractor, when they don't have work. They don't have a nest egg. They don't have savings put away because they never made a fair wage.
Sure.
So they only made enough to cover themselves through that job. And say the market dumps out, it's like now they don't have any money. And it was because they were taking advantage of their low cost.
Yeah, I think about it like walking through a job, right? And somebody tells you what they paid for a kitchen or a bathroom, and then realizing that it's underbuilt at that point. You paid that much for this. You were able to afford quality, and you didn't get quality, and that is an issue for me. But if I walked a kitchen and somebody told me, we paid $50,000 for this versus $150,000, and it was a $50,000 kitchen, and there were, it wasn't top tier, I would be that this is a good job for that price point. That's fair. Right. You can't expect $150,000 kitchen, $200,000 kitchen when you paid $50,000, and it's the same thing. You shouldn't expect a $50,000 kitchen when you paid $200,000. And I think that clearly defining those expectations and communicating them kind of absolves a lot of those potential issues and what they're kind of calling a problem. But I like to see people have the option of kind of multiple price points, but not the work has to reflect that. It can't just be the pricing's all over the place and it's the same work everywhere.
Right. And that's where it's also, a kitchen's not a kitchen, a house isn't a house, a car isn't a car, chicken tenders aren't chicken tenders, whatever you want to call
exactly.
There's different scale to all of that, and I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I'm in this industry and that's where my entire focus goes. But that's where it's a constant conversation. It's you spent what on that kitchen? What do you mean you spent $200,000 renovating that kitchen? I could have done that kitchen for $25,000.
Yeah.
It's oh no, I've done a kitchen for $6,000 before in a house I flipped when I was a teenager, but. It's a different caliber.
Yeah.
Do I need $200,000 cabinetry? Define need. What's my goal? Well, my goal is to have a really sexy kitchen that I want to show off to all my friends and have all the bells and whistles. Okay, you're going to spend a little bit more money for that.
Yeah.
I need a place to put my pots and pans. Great. I can get you cabinets for $6,000. It's totally different.
It's the level of, it's the expectation, the communication. I was out to dinner the other night with the girls. We went to a diner down the street, and I was sitting there listening to this conversation. The guy, they were probably 60 years old, maybe a little older, and they were having a conversation about wanting to get their floors replaced in their house. And he was saying how he got a hold of two contractors, and the one contractor, I guess he was looking to finance it. And I know for a fact that a lot of times if you are financing a job directly through a contractor, you're going to pay a premium because otherwise you wouldn't be able to afford that project. You know, you could go source financing yourself and you can save the interest rate, or you could possibly get a lower interest rate. But if you're looking to do that as a one-stop shop, direct to consumer, a lot of times it's going to be more money than just paying somebody outright. Which, like, on the contractor's end, there's more risk there. It's more work. And also, like, that's your business. That's how you're marketing. You're able to kind of market to a customer who's able or willing to pay a little bit more because they don't have the money up front. And the guy's saying how he got the two prices and the one contractor's financing was more, and he figured out who they were financing through and that he was marking up their interest rate. Not like in a dirty way where he's like telling them one inch or getting one interest rate and telling them another, but like he was charging more than if the guy would have sourced the loan himself.
No way.
Yeah, and he's like freaking out
because he's doing the work.
Exactly, and he's the guy's sitting there having this conversation with his wife, and he's like, I told him to get the F in his truck and leave. I'm just gonna go with this guy. He's this much less, and I'm sitting there like my daughters are. It's just me and the girls, and I'm thinking about this conversation and trying to pay attention to them, and I'm getting so angry. Because I'm like, this is what people think when they call us. That right. Like, guy who's offering financing, and that's not even to consider that maybe they do two completely different levels of work.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you're telling some guy to get the F in his truck and leave because he was more money than somebody else, like, maybe he just wants to make more money. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Like...
It's funny when like the whole markup thing is so interesting, and you know there's clients that get it and then there's clients that totally don't, or they get it but then they're like, but I don't want you to make that much money.
Yeah,
where it's like, okay, well, why?
Or that's cool, we won't warranty it, we won't measure for it, right. Like,
and it's super. I mean, and this is like the conversation, you know, about like when clients provide product and stuff like that. Like we have a project that a client is providing a fair amount of stuff for the project, and some of it's holding up work, like to the point where it's, you know, at this point we look bad because we're not finishing things. I'm like, but it's because we're waiting on something.
Yeah,
waiting on a product that we were told 6 weeks, and now it's been 16, 18, 20 weeks. And it's like, I can bring people back, but then it's just becoming more expensive for my trades. Who's paying for like the delay? Like, it's not fair. And it's like, but if we had managed it and made a markup on it, yeah, like that would have been on us. That would have been the risk that we take. And we would have put more effort into, like, we would have had more resources, aka money, to spend more time chasing this stuff down and figuring out how to make this work.
Or if you didn't and you dropped the ball,
it's on us.
Yeah, that's on you. And like,
our markup,
you're accountable
now. Yeah, we're making a little less money because we screwed up. But it's, yeah, I mean,
I just think it's like the thought and kind of how people perceive what we do in this like blanket that everything is the same. And this kind of ties back to that question where like everything is different. No two people do the job the same way. You have to see what you value and see what your contractor brings to the table. And that's the same conversation where people get a hold of me and it's like, well, why are you getting in touch with me? What's your reason for it? What are you looking for in a contractor? Why are you interested in working with us? Because everyone is different. Everyone has a different pricing structure, price point, a lifestyle that they want to support. It's not all the same. And like even this guy in the restaurant, that would be like me, you know, having a McDonald's and a Burger King next to each other and like going into McDonald's and the 6-piece nugget meal's $1 more and telling them, F you, I'm going to Burger King. You guys are ripping me off. And it's like, well, Burger King and McDonald's are different, even though like they're both fast food. Their chicken nuggets are different.
Right.
And just the idea that people think it's all the same.
I wonder, it's funny. Like I think about, like when you Google restaurants, right? One of the filters you can do is like the money signs.
Yep.
Like, is this one money sign or 4 money signs? And like when people talk about restaurants in our friend group, I'll sometimes say it. I'll be, is this a $4 sign restaurant? Like, no, it's not that nice. And it's like, it's funny as I'm sitting here, I'm like, what if we had that?
Yeah.
And I wonder, part of me thinks it would actually help, and help us in the sense like, well, I don't want to work with a $1 sign builder. I want to work with a $4
overall
sign.
I think like obviously there's going to be
the people that like, oh, I would never pay that much. And so I just got this book called Oversubscribed. This is not an ad, and people ask what books we read all the time. I just started reading it. I'm on chapter 2, but it's about how to get people lining up to do business with you. And it's talking about this whole like, if you want to create scarcity, right, which is what allows you to charge more.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about that, and I'm not through the books. Like I said, I'm only chapter 2, but it's interesting because it talks about the fact that you're not for everyone, and the sooner you can align. If you want to be a $4 sign builder, this is going to be a thing where people are like, well, I'm a $4 sign
$4 sign.
I want to be a $4 sign builder. Well, it's like, all right, well, you need a lot less clients to make the same profit as the guy that's a $1 sign builder. And when you start aligning with people that want to work with a $4 sign, like I've definitely looked at restaurants and I've grouped them by dollar signs. I'm like, all right, I want to take her out somewhere nice. Let's go to a $4 sign.
But
this sounds absolutely ridiculous.
No,
it's
true though, and I think overall, when you look at that big picture, it kind of puts people in, and you have to understand why you're in the $1 sign, 2, 3, or 4, right? And there's where I think the potential issue comes from is that there's different reasons why people are 3 versus 4, and it could be due to your like the way that your business is structured, employees versus subcontractors. It could be because of quality. So I think that digging into that is on the consumer's end, where like you could be hiring a $4 sign builder who has a higher overhead and maybe produces a lower quality of work than a $3 sign builder who has less overhead and, can do a higher quality of work there. So I think overall, it would for a lot of there's a lot of people who are just going to go straight for the 1, and there's a lot of people who are going to go straight for the 4, and then there's plenty of people who are like, I want something middle of the road.
But what makes it difficult is the fact that just because it's $4 sign restaurant doesn't mean it's a good restaurant.
Exactly, and that's where it's on the consumer,
right? Like you said, and that's someone asked me the other day. We were at a school event, and she was like, she was talking about doing a renovation. She's like, I'd love for you to look at the job. I'm like, what is it? She's like, well, I want to, do my bathroom over. And I'm like, I'm going to be very upfront with you. For us to do a project like that is going to be enormously expensive. And let me explain to you why. We have project managers. We have we supervise the job. It's project managed really, really well. But it's slightly overkill, maybe a lot overkill for a bathroom renovation.
Exactly.
Where it's, the guy that's going to be cheaper, it doesn't mean that he's going to do a lesser quality work. Like you just touched on, he has less overhead. The guy that's self-performing work, you find a really good self-performer, that guy's going to come in and do he might even do a better job than us, but he's going to be way more competitively priced or reasonably priced because he doesn't have all of the extras that we would because we're set up for larger scale projects.
You're just paying somebody's overhead at that point. And I think I also think that let's just say the price is the same there. I think that you're paying for overhead versus with the owner operator, you may be able to squeak more into that budget because you're not footing the bill of that overhead. So maybe the price is the exact same, but you're able to get more because you're putting money towards the investment rather than the overhead of kind of what it takes that contractor to be in business.
Yeah.
But having that conversation with people and communicating that with your customers is very important.
I think so. Something I said right in the beginning of answering it is also scale. So like thinking about building a home, and that's something that we've been talking about here at our meeting this week, and it's the scale of the home. And it's, why not build a smaller home? It's like everyone wants to build a big home, but then they can't afford to do so. Or the interest rates are up, so now they're what they could have spent $1 million, now they're only approved for 600,000. It's like, well, why not move into a smaller home at that point? And the thing with the smaller home, for me, what interests me the most is that you can spend more time. Say the budget is say they have a $2 million budget, for example, and the size of the home doesn't matter. If you shrink that home, you get to spend more time in the details.
Yep.
And when you get into the bigger home, it's oftentimes
carpet everything.
Carpet, applied vinyl base. Yeah. But it's when you shrink that back, this gives you the opportunity to, going back to the question, increase craftsmanship, for example, where it's like if you're trying to build a really big home and extend that budget really far, it's hard to have that craftsmanship be really, really high throughout every square inch of that home without it being really expensive. But if you shrink that home down, and now you're basically offsetting that cost by and increasing that quote unquote craftsmanship, because you can spend more time on it, spend more time on the details.
And I think that's kind of what I want to be doing. I understand that's what you want to be doing. And I think that there's a time and a place for that. And that's the conversation to be had there, where like, if you want to be doing nicer work and you're in an area that doesn't necessarily sustain that type of work, like you need to figure a way that you can scale back some and offer people value in these projects, where it's like, well, maybe we don't do the kitchen and the dining room, or the bathroom and the bedroom at the same time, and we just focus on the bathroom and then move on to the bedroom later. Or, you get to knock out one detail in that bathroom that's really sick, and the rest of it's like average,
Yeah.
Where I think that there's ways to kind of squeak that in, where the entire job doesn't have to be a showpiece.
Right.
There can be certain elements of that job where you really get to showcase your skill and put the budget towards, and the rest of it can just be like a bathroom.
So 2 clients, probably a little over, maybe a year ago, sat down at the end of the project and kind of debriefed, just asked what went well, what we should keep doing, what we should stop doing, all these things. And both of them, interestingly, told me that when I asked them, well, what should we stop doing? They had told me that I, Nick, personally, oftentimes pushed really hard and unnecessary on things that they didn't value.
Yeah.
And, in that moment, I'm like, I want to be defensive, but I'm like, all right, I'll hear this out. What specifically? And they were details that I really liked and ultimately cost more money. And they were like, you just push really hard, and I felt as though I didn't have a choice. One scenario was a particular hinge that I pushed for, and that was ultimately, we just did a bad job explaining why we should have went with a more expensive hinge, because we knew that door was going to be used all the time, and if we used a lesser quality hinge, it would have been a nightmare from a warranty, but we didn't do a good job explaining it. But what I realized then is, there's that famous, quality, price, and schedule, pick 2. You can't have all 3. And for us, and that's what we talk about a lot with the team, is like, it's not pick 2, you can't have 3. It's, and we said this last week, I believe, is put them in order of importance. What's the most important thing? And it's usually quality. I definitely talked about this last week. It's usually quality, and then it's usually followed by price, and then usually schedule is the last for us, right? Yeah. And when you look at, then you start approaching your project with those constraints. It's like, okay, you have to come to the table understanding that quality is number 1. So bring an option to the table that's going to net the best quality. But it might get nixed because maybe the cost is really high. So what is our most cost-effective option? And then you can kind of look at those 2 and understand the options and make a decision based on that. But this is where, again, whether it's a lesser cost project or a lesser, quality craftsmanship, you have to understand the constraints and the expectations on an individual level.
I also think that when like that conversation with those customers, if you were to have that conversation beforehand, and maybe you did, but where they're hiring you and what are they looking for? Like you're asking them, but you also have to kind of advocate for yourself to, hey, as a contractor, this is how our priorities align. This is what we're looking for. And number 1 is quality. Number 2, budget. And then 3, schedule. Because if your customers don't fully comprehend what you're bringing to the table, who you are, and what you're about, they may be hiring you for the wrong reasons. Where you should be coming to the table and being like, hey, listen, there's going to be a lot of situations that we've run into this job where we're going to push for something that's more money because we understand that it's going to really up the quality of this project. It's going to create a drastically better project than if we were to value engineer this. And I think if your customers understand that, like maybe you lose a job based on that. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at big picture 10 years down the road, that customer that's unhappy with you, that felt like you shoved a bunch of expensive stuff down their throat and doesn't ever refer you and tells the architect or the designers that they felt that way, and then that that affects your relationship with all of them. I think big picture, losing that job is valuable to your business. And I think, just clearly defining who you are when people come to you. It's not just, and I haven't read this book, but it's not just about what your customers are looking for in you. It's understanding what you want to deliver for them, because you want to be doing the jobs that you want to be doing. And
right. You like exactly what you just said. You got to communicate it up front. Like, these are the expectations you should expect from us. And when these things do come up, the most important thing, and this is what we talk about internally, is that we can't just say, hey, we're going to change that material to a more expensive one because it's better. It's like, walk them through it as if they have zero idea what material we're even talking about.
I mean, think about it as like a restaurant, right? Where you go to a restaurant and they're not going to change their menu based on what you want to spend. Like, restaurants establish themselves and their menu and the food that they want to be putting out because that's what makes them wake up every day. Like, that's what that chef envisioned. That's their life. That's what makes them breathe. That's what makes them click. Like, that's their baby. And it's no different from what we do. You want to be building a certain type of house, and you're not going to completely change the way, like, maybe, somebody has a food allergy. Let's work around this. Like, somebody doesn't like this. We can substitute this in. Sure. Right. But you're not going to recreate your menu as a chef to kind of fit a customer who doesn't want that level of dining experience, where it's the same thing we do. Like, and there's give and take there, but like, you want to be building a certain level of house. You're not going to change everything about your business to fit this customer's program. So like, part of our job is ensuring that what your program and your agenda is as a builder, as a human, as a business owner, and as an entrepreneur, fits your customer's program as good as possible, fits the architect, the engineer, the designer's program. And if it doesn't, you need to find a different customer, and don't let it's not necessarily the other way around.
I think Brad from AFT and maybe Matt Reisinger, I feel like they had a conversation about this, but they both have communicated there's things that are non-negotiables, and oftentimes they have to do with life safety, meaning like they're not going to negotiate the foundation and the life safety systems, the mechanical systems, the framing. But when it comes, and I think it was specific around like bidding it out, right? Like, oh, can you get another price on the foundation? It's like, no, the foundation is the most important part of this house. We'll never have a chance to redo it. So I'm working with a guy I trust that's going to do a good job. But when it comes to the finishes, this is where, okay, yeah, we can price this out. We can look at a couple different options. You do a different material or consider it, because it's not important. And from your reputation, it's not going to impact your reputation.
Correct.
Where it's like, yeah, I hate that tile, the builder sucks. It's like, no, I hate that tile, I made a bad choice.
Yeah.
It's, and that, I think, plays a big role into, what you have to bring to the table, as these are the things that, we do different. And, I'm going through this exact thing with, the roof on our Needham build with Steve Teague. And people, we've been posting about it, and thankfully engagement is flying through the roof because of it. But people are like, you're overbuilding it, you're just doing this to charge your clients more. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't need to do that. I could have done it this way. And it's, I don't take them to heart, but there's definitely the consideration, like, is this the general feeling on it? And I was actually on site, and I was chatting with Dimitri, the framer, and I was like, hey, now that you've built it, like built the roof, like, do you look up there and be like, man, that's way overbuilt, or that's over engineered, or we could have done that way easier or less expensive, or used less lumber? And he didn't even bat an eye. He said no. He goes, honestly, I think that, like, there was a few things that we added because we felt as though we needed to, because they we felt that some of the areas were actually under engineered, so we upped it in a few areas. And ultimately, number one, I'm glad to know that that's the way they feel. And and people can argue, yeah, well, he just wants to charge you more time to frame the house. It's like, it's not about that. It's not about the cost. It's understanding what the intent there is. And this is a forever home for this family. And for us, the way we're building it, this isn't a 50, 75, 100-year home. This is a home that hopefully will be there for 500 years. And it's, and we're in, it's the consideration to build the best house that we can, and walk that line between, hey, is that overbuilt, or are we just building a really quality home? And this roof system is a perfect example, where when you start thinking about it and really dissecting how that roof is built, you realize that there's a lot of potential weak points that maybe would never shed light, but or maybe it sheds light in the plaster ceiling, and then we have a crack that we fill every single year. And that's something that we talked about specifically, is like, yeah, there's this point load that, we actually added another brace because we felt as though when there was pressure on that roof, it was going to push on the middle of your ceiling. So we transferred that load over to a bearing wall.
I mean, overbuilt to who as well? Where it's like,
great point.
Maybe that's overbuilt to somebody who wants a house that they're going to be in for 10 years. Like, maybe that's overbuilt to an investor. But if your customers want that and you want to be building that, then, like, it's not overbuilt to you. If you have a customer who doesn't want that and you're doing that, yeah, then that roof's overbuilt, right? Because that's not what they want to be spending their money on. But if everyone's on the same page, like, that's not overbuilt. Right. Which I wanted to talk about. Rachel sent me a Instagram post, which I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it was a siding guy who's basically saying, like, anyone who's buying a house between 2020 and 2022, and I don't think this applies to what we're doing, but I know it's applicable to a lot of people out there. They're like, you are literally buying the worst house that you can purchase, because, oh my gosh, like, we're not using quality materials. We're not using quality subs. We're not taking our time to do things. And it's like, all these people are out there building right now because that's what they want to do. The economy's hot, interest rates were good, but, like, you're literally buying the worst house that you can. And I never really thought about it from that perspective. But then, when I see, like, what's going up behind us and the quality of sub that's there, and kind of the progress of construction, the materials that are getting dropped off, and it's like, you're investing all of your money right now in a house, and, like, yeah, dude, pretty much all that's going into it is shitty.
Dude, it's like, I've told you this before, and I think you even saw some of it when you were here, but I mean, South Boston, where we live, there's all these multifamilies going up, and I constantly stare at them when they're in like the WRB phase. And it's like there's this project that had blue skin on it, and it's like it's patched in kind of here and there, and I'm like, are they gonna? Oh no, they're not even covering that piece of and there goes the siding.
Yep, dude, it's going on right down the street too,
dude. And then there was one I was like, oh yeah, they're definitely like that's definitely temporary Tyvek, and I'm like, holy shit, no, they're putting siding up, and then it's every one of these buildings, I say something to Meg about it. There was one that had like steel that went from inside to outside that was just covered by stone with no insulate. I'm like, they're gonna have mold.
Yeah.
Like that's not like we're not even talking about damage. We're talking about like health, like concerns in this home. But the like I would say 3 of them have been completed. All 3 of them have now had a boom lift in front of them at some point, ripping siding off. One of them had, like they had patches ripped off everywhere. I'm like, because they have water issues.
Yeah.
Because they didn't install it correctly.
Dude, there's a guy building his own house down the street who owns a roofing and siding company, and like it's patched in Tyvek, and like the WRB doesn't tie into the window flashing, and like you're building and managing your own house as a roofing and siding contractor. And it's just, like, oh, there's like a 6-inch piece of siding exposed here or sheathing exposed here with nothing on it. And like, there's just siding going over that right now.
Houses need to breathe anyway.
But yeah, it is. I never thought about it that way until she said, and obviously like the post was meant for engagement, and it's slightly comical. But the guy was basically like, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm the one covering up these houses. Like, I'm putting the exterior finish on. And you could tell it, like, probably vinyl siding. He's not in a place that is building, like, a super high-end home. But he's like, this is worse. This is the worst I've ever seen it. It kind of got me thinking where, subs are really stretched right now. People's the stock market, people started building houses and the stock market tanked, and like they're trying to tighten up budgets. Nobody can get there on time. Nobody can get material. So even the order of operations where things are typically done aren't being done the best way that they can, because builders are like, well, in order to do this right, we would have to do it to this point, stop, cover it up, come back, peel back, tie this back in. And they're like, well, we're not going to do all that. We're just going to like, what's the quickest way until we can get this window or until we can get this part that we need.
And that's using the wrong constraint, dude, where they're putting schedule first.
Exactly. Like the house behind me, they still don't have temp power. And
they're in finish?
Dude, it's been over a year and a half that they've been building it. Yeah, they finished all the drywall. Now they have cabinets in there. They have people
doing tile. How are they heating it?
Dude, there's nothing.
No climate control.
No climate control. There's no power. There's no water. They had people do the entire like cultured veneer stone foundation. No water on site for the masons. They had all the drywall finished.
Wait, hold on a second. Did they steal water from you?
No, dude. They're bringing in like 55-gallon drums of water.
Why don't they have temp power?
I don't know.
I mean, I have so many
questions. First thing that I would have done was get temp power to the site.
Yeah.
They just set a utility pole last week. They don't have temp power. And like that house is over 8,000 square feet, half of it's walkout basement. So the entire bottom floor, there's no windows on 3 sides of it. And there's a couple on like the back side of the house. So you had drywallers in there finishing drywall with no lights. And it's like, what do you think that's going to look like? You have people in there doing work every day. All of your rough-ins, like, nothing, no power, like no lights. It's getting dark this time of year. And like, I don't know if this is the way these people build all the time, but like, it's certainly how they're building in 2022 now. And like, it just blows my mind that like you're investing in this home. And maybe that's what you're paying for. Maybe that's all that you are willing to afford and value, and like your cabinets and your floor being in an unconditioned house is like that's fine to you, but I'm just absolutely mortified that that's like how this is going.
Yeah.
And that like to me is kind of what's happening right now. And I think that everyone gets greedy and everyone wants more jobs and they're taking on more work and they can't finish jobs out and close jobs out. So they're sitting on money and starting a new job where it's, I think that you either need to have more money on those jobs to manage them better and more time spent up front to plan accordingly to get things ordered beforehand and just put more manpower on keeping these jobs going, or need to scale back.
It's, yeah, I don't know. It's the constraint thing. I feel like I've been using that word so much, but you have to understand the correct constraints, and it should not be schedule. And I say in our world, right? Like, I get that, schedule is oftentimes an impact for developers and building on speculative, but there still needs to be some control around quality. And I don't mean that it needs to be at its highest quality, but there has to be the non-negotiables when it comes to building. And the non-negotiables meaning like
temp power,
temp power, the what's going to control the longevity of the home, the health of the home, the indoor air quality of the home. It's like those things matter beyond house.
Yeah,
like just the fact that you're okay. I finished the house, now people can live there. It's like, sure, but what happens when it leaks and mold grows and the family gets sick and then the kids develop asthma and then it's a big issue. And if you dig into it, like, there's lawsuits and everything around big builders around mold and like the poor health of people that live in these homes, but that's what we're dealing with. So when we talk about, like, full circle here, lower income craftsmanship, the fact of the matter is that you need to spend the time to still build a quality home that does what it needs to protect.
Everyone is entitled to a healthy and safe home that like budget at that, but like it doesn't matter if you can't provide that for somebody, you shouldn't do that job.
Right. Or shrink the home down.
Exactly.
Like, you don't need as big of a home. Shrink the home down and figure out the scale in which you can provide a safe and healthy home. Because it's far too often that the size or the luxury items, we'll call them, take precedence over just providing a safe and healthy environment.
Yeah, it's like,
and that sucks.
Sick. You got a herringbone finish in in place white oak floor, but like you have mold in your walls.
Right.
You have bad air quality. And I think that, it is, everyone's entitled to a healthy and safe home. Not everyone is entitled to a level of finish that's top tier. I mean, you are if you're willing to pay.
It.
Yeah, but like, you shouldn't be doing a job if you can't do it safely and healthily. Is adverb healthily? I don't know if that's an adverb. And if you can't do that at a bare minimum, you shouldn't be doing that job for those customers. You need to have that conversation with them.
Healthfully.
All right, that's better.
Healthfully.
Yeah. Cool, man. Next week, who do we have on?
Next week we actually have Adam McKee. So Adam McKee is Contemporary Woods on Instagram. He's been a big supporter of the podcast, has always reached out to us. But he said he wanted to share about that he's nobody special, and he lives in a normal city and runs a slightly better than average business, doing work that is amazing but not cutting edge. So he wants to talk about inspiring the next generation. Work should support life, his struggles, his vision, personal growth, and why in life it is to inspire the celebration of the craft. So we'll dig into that next week. And if you guys want, I have not checked to see if you guys dropped a comment. We'll see if we have any new.
The other thing that we're doing right now, to our listeners, is we're getting some people in place to help with vendor relationships, partners, scheduling, lining up new guests. So an issue that Nick and I have had over the years is like taking time aside to really probe and chase after high quality guests, just because I mean, people who are successful and people who are busy, it's tough to kind of nail them down, and you have to go after them consistently. So we're putting some people in place to make that easier on us, because we typically have a million things going on with family and business. Tough to do. So if there's some higher level guests that you guys and girls are thinking you want, let us know. Shoot us an email at the Modern Craftsman.
Info at the Modern Craftsman.
Info at the Modern Craftsman. I think you should be able to get to that from our Instagram. There should be an email link on there. So
yes.
Better than DM. And we can pass that off to the appropriate people to kind of start hunting down these guests that we haven't had the capacity to do before now. So.
Yeah, and we do have a little swag to give away. So great show, solid production, says at a Cat J, Katje. I've been listening to these.
Maybe
Katja. Yeah. I've been listening to these guys for a couple of years now and appreciate how the show covers all aspects of construction business, whether it's products, tax planning, or building practices. The guys and their guests make it interesting and educational. So. At a.katje, shoot us a DM on Instagram with your size and your email address, and we'll get you some swag sent out. If you guys want some swag in the future, you can always buy it on our store, link in our bio on Instagram, or head over to iTunes, drop us a 5-star review, and maybe we will read it on next week's episode. Thanks to our sponsors, Duration Molding and Millwork and Rockwell.